In the city of illusions where the dorks reside, with their trust funds and their daddy's pride, they play with power and they pull the strings, but they don't care about the chaos that it brings. They worship Moloch with their secret clubs. In the depths of their mansions, the high-rise hubs. Conspiracy theories they keep spinning round, but they'll never know the truth that they found. Trust fund dorks and their Moloch worship, living in a world that's twisted and hip. They think they're in control, but they're just pawns in a game they can see. They're all just cards.
Can you believe that shit?
I'm your huckleberry.
All right, we are here with the Paranoid American, Thomas. Thomas, thank you so much for doing this podcast with me. I really appreciate it. I first heard you on Occult Book Club with Juan, which became one of my favorite segments, and it seemed like you guys kind of like got too busy for each other there for a second. So I really do miss that, and it's cool that you have your own podcast, because I actually didn't even realize that until you told me. So I started listening to you and putting you in my rotation as well. So it's pretty much Tinfoil Hat, Juan, and you, and a few of the other people that we listen to so much. You know what I mean? I think I got a good rotation of the truth going on as far as, you know, where I put my energy and my attention. Before we get too carried away, will you tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, man, that I got some real estate in like the brain space. So I appreciate that a lot. And you can find me at paranoidamerican.com. And if you just search for wherever you listen to podcasts or wherever you're listening to this right now, you should be able to search for Paranoid American and find something about mine.
That's right. That's right. And one thing about the Paranoid American, he is great comics and illustrations, and putting the occult knowledge into visuals, which I believe will help people wake up faster, because, you know, you start rifling off numbers and, you know, alchemical stats, you know, and people, they just start, you know, drifting away, you know. But when you can put it into a visual, it helps this like dumbed down version of society, which, you know, nobody reads anymore. They're always like, oh, I just need to listen to it in a audible book or watch it on X or some sort of social media or Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer visuals. The main reason that I even like to do comics is because I realized at a real young age that I couldn't really grasp something, like any kind of concept, until I could visualize it. So once I could start like having things click in my mind, then all of a sudden it would like come together. You know, math, music, biology, like any course at all in school, I'd have to have some kind of diagram or reference. And if there didn't one exist, I would just make one up in my mind, and hopefully it was accurate, because that was the one that I was going to remember. And that's kind of what I've carried over into this, because like you're saying, a lot of the conspiracy and the occult research, it devolves heavy into names and dates, and sometimes like gematria, and it starts getting into like math formulas and stuff. And that's not the type of research that uh, I don't want to say interest. Like I'm interested by all of it, but it doesn't sink in the same way. It doesn't really make as much sense to me. So I kind of started doing the comics out of like a necessity, and I figured if it works for me, it's got to work for other people. And that was kind of the main birth of it, combined with trying to get away from the doom and gloom aspect too. When I first started out, I got a lot of feedback from people that I was working with at Disney in the industry, and every single one of them, maybe this was like the machine, trying to like suppress, but every one of them I took it to heart, was like, if you're gonna be in the comic book and like the cartoon space, like you would do yourself a favor by making things lighthearted, like actually make things funny and joke around and sort of like take things to like this caricature-esque level where it's not just like reality doom gloom, because that was the original sort of angle, and like that's kind of what's been driving me ever since then.
Yeah, and I love it, and I can really appreciate that because when you start learning the truth, and I'm not really sure, where I'm at on the whole thing. I know that I believe in a creator. I know that, ever since I started reading the Bible and started going deep into making those type of connections, my life has gotten nothing but better, like by far and away. And I've always accomplished goals, but the closer I get to the truth, the better my life gets, but the farther I get away from people I love because they don't want to talk to me anymore. You know what I mean? Because they are, not as far as my direct family that lives in my house, my wife and my children, they're all on the same level. But as far as my mom and my stepdad, and it's like my brother, it's like, they all took the vaccine. I told them not to, like where it all goes from there, right?
Yeah.
You've been part of it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, around 40s now, so I've been through a bunch of different waves of these like pandemic scares and lots and lots of all these iterations of stuff. And I've kind of just learned to accept to like I kind of use the comic books to talk, or at least I did for the last 20 years. Now I'm coming on podcasts and I'm kind of like putting my opinions in real time and stuff. But for the longest time, for that exact reason, like alienating friends and family, it felt like it just made more sense to put what I felt in a comic book, because a comic book is really hard, at least my opinion. It would be really hard to like take offense to it right away, even if it was saying things that you didn't agree with. Like seeing it kind of animated in front of you, it's not the same as if you're at like a dinner table, you're out chilling with the homies, and now all of a sudden you've got like an opinion that they don't agree with. It's not that it's like a cheat code, like you still will alienate people, but it was sort of a way of like, look, yeah, I believe this, but I believe it in this kind of a silly, ridiculous way that's open to discussion and not in
Yeah.
this like tight, closed off box kind of way. So that's how I kind of communicated all my beliefs in this whole space for over like almost 2 decades. And now for the last couple years, I'm willing to maybe like put my mouth where my comics are. I don't know how that phrase would work in this context.
Well, I love it. I love it, and I really appreciate the diversity of getting the message across because as we become more enlightened, as you say, as this information hits us and we start making connections, which I believe these synchronicities are a direct line of communication with the creator, God, whatever. For example, I was like, Lord, I am not looking at another 77 tonight. Like, I just can't do it. I'm just done. I'm done writing this book tonight. I'm just going to go out and watch Roadhouse with my family because I'm from the Florida Keys. Supposedly the setting was the Florida Keys. I'm into MMA, boxing, and bare knuckle, as you know. It had Conor McGregor in it, so I wanted to see how ridiculous he was going to be, And I'm out there, and what's the only mile marker that Jake Gyllenhaal walks by? 77, right there on the road. I look right at my wife. She goes, "What the fuck is going on?" She says, "What the fuck's going on?" You know what I mean? As I'm, finding 77s, as many as I can every day, which I believe, in my opinion, is this Simyaza, 3377 type worship, What is your take on what the hell's really going on in this? Are we in a simulation? Do you believe in a creator? Is Nimrod running the show? Like, is Aleister Crowley just LARPing us all to death? Like, what's going on?
I think Crowley was dude, I think at this point we're all Crowley. And I don't mean that in like I want that to be the reality, but Crowley was kind of one of the first people that was by birth like a self-promoting, self-hyping, look what I can do. Like check out this edgy stuff that I'm doing. I'm going to travel around and put my thoughts out there no matter who cares about it. That was very anti what was commonplace society at almost all levels and castes. Like almost nobody, you could almost expect someone from like a lower level of society to be doing this. Maybe if they're like drunk or they're just, because it's easy to shuffle them around. But Crowley did it in such a way that he kind of changed that whole concept of like, oh, this should be normal. Like everyone can be a star. Like that was actually one of the things that kind of came from Crowley is like, we're all stars. So this whole concept of like rock stars all the way to streamers to like any kind of celebrity of any kind and anyone that's chasing maybe even me and you that are like putting out content, like that's kind of like a very Crowleyan way of going about things. But I think it's almost like he ushered in this new way that things had to work. So Crowley's like a wild rabbit hole that you could go down forever. I think that when we're talking about like synchronicities and the numbers and you're seeing 77, this is like maybe a bad analogy, but it's like think of like an old school like PlayStation 1 or 2 game, and you kind of knew that there were rules that if you walked so far to the edge somewhere, like the character would just stop moving. Like you wouldn't be able to go anywhere like further, and it would just kind of be like an invisible wall, and you just be like, oh, that's the boundaries of whatever this level is, and you would just kind of move on, just understanding that's a limitation. You know what I mean? And the same thing that there might be little like bugs in the system, and I kind of think that that's sort of what the synchronicities are. Like when you see that 77 is like bumping up and being like, oh yeah, I forgot. I don't normally see it, but there's like this invisible wall here. There's like this rule that exists in this world that normally you can just exist without even considering it. And the second you bump into it, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. This is a video game that operates on math and it operates on limitations and hardware. And that's why I can't go over that next mountain and stuff. And I kind of think that that's what all these numbers that come up. Some people are like 322 and 237 for Kubrick and 77 and 13 and 33.
Right.
You're like really into masonry and stuff. And I think that it's just like a reminder that you're just walking around. I mean, I hate bringing up like Matrix as the constant example, but it's just like you're bumping around in a source code. And every time you see 33 is caused like, or 77, that's just part of like this weird source code that's just running everything. But I don't know if that means it's a simulation or not.
I'm more because so many are construction related. I'm more inclined to believe that these trust fund dorks are more concerned with putting them into the narrative to ensure whatever their ritual, the success of their ritual. For example, the cops, they held the police held the parents back, on purpose for 77 minutes at Uvalde, and even the one, if you watch it on Twitter, the video, when the one cop tackled the one mom to the ground, the other cop turned around with his head down and he just walked away. Like he just couldn't stomach what was going on because he knew it was all fucked up, because those guys are all trained to run to the threat, even if they're by themselves. And for them to stand outside and listen to gunshots for 77 minutes is wild. It's fucking, that's out of all the ones I found, that's the scariest one. And there's so many that are construction related. For example, the 77th Congress builds the Pentagon on the 77th, pair on the longitude. It builds it 77 feet high. It builds it with 7,700 windows. And then it's hit by which flight? 77, which is in the air for 77 minutes. Now, to me, you're talking source code and maybe, but
yeah,
to me, that's more like, that's these trust fund dorks have to put 77 in everything because they believe it ensures their success, or it's a shout out to whichever leader they, are assigning that number, So yeah, I mean, it is very interesting once you start, really wrapping your mind about what the fuck's going on. Because let me tell you, I thought it was just a 9/11 thing. I've gone back through all of the of our historical man-made calamities. Now, not like Mount St. Helens or shit like that, but if they were man-made news between people, you'll find the 77 right there almost every time. I mean, at Waco, I was sitting there looking for the 77 victims, and it was 76, 76, 80, 75. I'm like, where is it? Where is it? And then boom, I found the actual original one from 1993. He's like, brings the victims up to 77. So, there it is right there. It's never ending, Oklahoma City, 9/11, Waco, the Georgia Guidestones, it doesn't matter where it is. The 77 is there, it's everywhere. This bridge that just got broken up, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, opened in 1977. So, and I was looking for that. I was like, where's it going to be? And then boom, it's right there. You know what I mean? So it's never ending.
You can make really compelling arguments for that the number is being intentionally used in order to like orchestrate stuff because it's part of this ritual. The hardest part for me to sort of resolve, if we were to like accept that that's what's going on, I don't know that these trust fund kids, as you call them, are that competent that they could be so damn consistent that like no one ever screws up and does 76 or they do like 78. And I know that it's a little bit of a cop out because it's almost like a sibling of the, oh, no conspiracy could be that big because there'd have to be too many people on it. And then you've got like the Manhattan Project where things are compartmentalized enough that you could orchestrate this huge thing and not have everyone in on it to kind of spoil it. But to be so damn precise that call lengths would be exactly 77 minutes, and that like the windows you can orchestrate, if it's building related, yeah, because someone sat down for years and put that on paper and got approvals and did budget calculations and all that. So anything building related, but all of like the time related stuff, it will be so hard. I would just submit one other option. And I don't know if you ever seen like ferrofluid before. It's like this this like a liquid magnet that you can suspend in another liquid, and once you put a magnet up to it, it kind of like surrounds it from all angles and forms these like really crazy geometric symmetrical patterns. And if you like move the magnet around and stuff, they all kind of align to that magnetic field. So a lot of people are like, oh wow, cool design, but really what you're seeing is just this like little fragments of magnets in liquid that are aligning themselves to what those that magnetic field would actually look like. You're visualizing a magnetic field that you couldn't see before because of these ferrofluids. And I would almost say that that's what that 77 could be, is that imagine tragedy is like a huge magnet. And so that anything that gets like attracted to that magnet kind of snaps into place. So there might be a whole lot of things that correspond to 77. You might see a lot of 33s. You might see a lot of whatever, pick your number, because every one of those things, it's just like seeing a little spike of ferrofluid, because that spike of ferrofluid only exists when a whole bunch of different particles all get aligned to that same little channel of the electromagnetic field. And it does it in all directions. So you're kind of just seeing like that one spike. You're seeing that number 77 spike, but there's a bunch of other ones too. And I think that's one of the explanations for where synchronicities come from. Like they're real, but I find it almost impossible to ever prove a human intent on anything. Because even if someone told you, yeah, I planned that, like I planned it to be 77 minutes, there's also a chance that they're like, oh, I didn't realize, it was on 77. I'll go ahead and say that was me planning that so that I feel like I'm more important. And now you think I've got some kind of magical power, when really it just like, I'm just doing what the universe kind of like forced me into, and I'm taking credit for it to impress other people. I think there's a lot of that goes on.
Yeah, hear me out, Thomas. This is what I think. This is when it comes to the 77, and I look through all the, we're talking movies, we're talking, I mean, I think it's more of they believe it's like, you know, whether they're giving a shout out to someone, it also is some sort of manifestation of, you know, bringing it to success. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily be death. That's why they include it in so many movies. Like, I mean, it's in so many fucking movies, including the big one that just came out, the Roadhouse movie. I mean, it's like you said, it's this, like you and Juan always say, these cinemagicians, this movie magic, right? And so you see 77 and so many things. So I think that the numbers don't even necessarily have to be real. Flight 7, we all believe it was a missile that hit the Pentagon, right? But they tell you it was Flight 77, and they tell you it was in the air for 77 minutes. So then it's like double, you know, double worship. It doesn't even have to be real as long as people believe it, you know, because you and I believe that it was a missile, but they just tell you it was Flight 77, and then that makes another 77 in the whole bunch of 77s that are already there. So they don't even have to be real information as long as people are buying the narrative and they're buying the information that's put out. They're like, the trust fund dorks are like, yeah, you know, we got the more 77s through and no one noticed, you know, but now people are starting to notice that they're everywhere. And yeah, it's either one of two things, in my opinion. It's either supernatural, and that there literally is Flight 77 in the air for 77 minutes, which I don't believe. I believe this is all just trust fund dork fuckery, putting their numbers into everything. For example, the 77 Congress declares World War II with Public Act 77 after 177 Japanese aircraft sunk, you know, the Arizona, which had 1177 sailors on it. You know what I mean? So to me, you know, whether those the numbers don't even have to be real. They're just going to put those Crowleyan, you know, 93s, 77, 42s, 666s and everything. And they believe that it's, you know, getting their legacy of keeping, you know, 1,000 years Reich of, you know, trust fund dork shit going on, you know, to keep that going on. You know what I mean? Because imagine this, Thomas. Imagine if your family was in charge of running the world for thousands of years. When it's your turn, you know, what would be your biggest, because I'm a fighter, I'm always thinking about being in my opponent's head. What would be your biggest like concern? It would be fucking it up for everyone. So so they're always high stress. They're always high stress, afraid that everyone's going to figure it out, you know, and before they have to do another reset, in my opinion. So, you know, that's where I'm at, you know, and at this point, I trust myself in these synchronicities, you know, more than any scientist or, you know, religious pulpit or, you know, no matter what, you know, at this point, I trust my own gut instinct and, you know, Manly P. Hall, you know, more than, you know, other things that are being put out there.
I think you're right 100% about making the numbers up. Like, they don't have to be real. Like, here, I'll give you two practical examples. The first one will be silly, and the second one will be a little bit more practical. But imagine if instead of 77, all these tragedies coincidentally were all like 69 and 420. You know, like every single one of them. Like, all of a sudden, then it would probably stand out a little bit more because it's like, what? Like, are you being serious? Like 69 minutes and it had 69 windows and 420 people died. Like, if those were the numbers, because those numbers kind of have like a silly connotations to them. So
Yeah.
that's one example of you would notice it more. But if it's just 93 or if it's just 237 or if it's just 77 and stuff, those numbers aren't necessarily charged in such like a massive normie way that mean very specific things to people. Like, a very tiny niche of people even knows that 93 is like a thalamic number, and even out of those people, very few would even care that it's, you know what I mean? But if it was 420 and 69, now all of a sudden every 13-year-old would be snickering every time it came up. So it would be a thing. So that's the silly version, just to make the point that the numbers do matter. and like they could just shuffle it up a little bit, and the fact that it's always the same thing. So that's one aspect. And the other one is that how psychological these numbers are and how well crafted entire industries focus on numbers that mean nothing. Like, for example, $14.99. Like, what is it about that one penny, especially when a penny right now? Like, when's the last time that anyone even used a penny for anything other than just trying to like round off tax or something? But like, a penny's worthless. So that 99 cents versus 14.99 versus 15, it still has a psychological impact because our whole country for the longest time, for generations, has kind of been trained that like, oh no, 14.99 is cheaper because it's only $14, and you like your brain skips that 99-cent part. So even though it doesn't mean anything, like the companies I don't think are banking on like like, oh man, we're missing out on that one penny. Like the psychological trick is worth way more than that one penny would be to them. And it became so ubiquitous that it's not even like Dow Chemical and like Procter and Gamble and all these different companies are coordinating, and they're like, look guys, we're all going to do 99. No one screw this up. No one do 98. No one do 93. We're all going to do 99. It's almost just like they all see it working, and it's like, well, damn, if this is working so well, and it's almost like a magic ritual where it's like like me copying someone else doing a ritual, even though like I might not know what the hell they're doing, like it kind of makes the ritual itself that much more strong because now more people are doing it. And that's why the 99-cent thing has such a strong impact, because freaking everybody does it. So on a subconscious level, you're like, oh, there must be a reason that everyone does it. It must make more sense. It must be better for me that everyone does 99. And I think that that's kind of that 7-7. And I remember there's like a random anecdote, but I remember a long time ago when I used to have like Fox News or CNN or something on at night. I would fall asleep to the news. And I remember waking up one night, it was like 3 a.m. and it was just like reporting all the stuff going on. And it was just literally like, and at 2:44, there was 44 people and 44 cars. And like they just kept saying the same number over and over. And I was like, this is like, I'm being programmed right now. There's no way that all these numbers are real. It was like, and why else are you playing this?
It's impossible.
Bro,
it's impossible. To me, it can't be supernatural. It's these guys, doing shout outs and copying and pasting what their, people did before. And, when Crowley is obsessed with this number 77, and 77 is a big number in the Bible, and that they're obsessed with inverting everything. And, I think that's really what it is. It's just kind of a Crowleyan, as he talked to this AWAS character, he starts making connections that it is the devil or the Baphomet. And, I connect everything kind of to the Book of Enoch when it comes to the Bible, as far as the names go. I'm trying to bring the name Semyaza to light more than people referring to the devil or the adversary, because I think that these trust fund dorks, whatever they worship, they get everyone confused about, these different names of certain things, and they don't know where to look. And then they're posting 77 on every single calamity, leaving their signature everywhere. And everyone thinks that this is real, when it's all just pro wrestling to get everyone's, attention, looking at this scrying that has, cinemagicians on it.
Well, imagine too, let's say that this is just like hypothetical, but let's say there's like 99 clubs out there. And they're all like in a big, the number secret society, and every club kind of owns their own little number. Like every lodge has got their number, and it's almost like Lodge 77 is just flexing the hardest. They're like, look at how dope this club is. We're the ones that are putting the most tags out on the city street. You know what I mean? And it's like there is a Club 76 and a 75 and a set, like all those clubs exist, but they're just not all at the same level. Like not everyone can be the 94 Bulls, you know what I mean? Like there's only one 94 Bulls. I think that's one of their golden years. And it's like everyone else is still in the league, but like they all are in different levels, you know what I mean? So in this case, maybe 77 is just like they're the ones that are killing it right now.
Damn, but that could for a long time.
3 next.
Yeah, for a long time they've been killing it. You know, you could you trace this back. I mean, it's at least ever since, you know, before World War II, right around when Crowley was, you know, dying or whatever. When did Crowley die? In the 40s, right?
Yeah, 1940s.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's right around that time when you start seeing this 77 flex like really big time, you know. So yeah, that is super interesting, man. I wanted to ask you, if you had to, I want to make this poster, and I want to put 9 people on there, like kind of like the Brady Bunch, but it's the Babylon Bunch, right? And if you had to put 9 of your most infamous trust fund dorks on there, who would that be?
Oh, that's a big list, but we could probably go through them. You'd have to have Zuckerberg and Elon on there, no question. You'd probably have to have Branson. Do they all have to be living?
No, no, absolutely not. Like we're talking John D. Rockefeller, right? I mean, we're
Yeah,
talking
John D would probably be on there. Carnegie would be on there. Basically, the whole Jekyll Island Hunt Club would be really easy to fill it all up with. So that would give you like Theodore Vale. It would give you
Walt Disney, right? It's got to be
I
Walt
don't
on
know,
there.
man. I honestly, so I mean, this is probably just my programming speaking right now, but I honestly think that Walt Disney might be a net positive for America in particular. Man, I don't know about the whole world, but I think that there's a chance that he could be a net positive for America, because a lot of the things that he did, let's say that it was all magic. Let's say that he was like a high level. That's the claim, is he's like this high level evil Freemason, and he programmed the whole nation. I think he was really a Desmoulins kid growing up, and he himself, Walt Disney person, got infiltrated by the government, and they turned him into kind of like a little bit of a puppet. They exploited a lot of his emotions and weaknesses and stuff. I think that he was a flawed American that essentially helped America at the detriment of himself. And then that vehicle of Disney becomes co-opted by the government, and they take it over, and they're the ones that turn it into like this absolute evil creation. I know that's highly it's like highly controversial to even take that viewpoint on it, but I think that like he gets a lot of hate, but if you go and see what his opinions were at the time that he was getting hated, it almost aligns with the people today that are like anti Disney. Like you don't see that the corporate aspect of his company like kicked him out of it, and then he just wanted to be like a family man. He wanted to make things that he could enjoy with his family, and he wasn't necessarily like this like a Rockefeller, you know what I mean? That's my opinion on it. But I don't think Disney would be in that club. But you'd also have like Joseph Pulitzer, like the Pulitzer Prize. He would be in there. If I didn't mention Branson would be in there. It would have to be
Yeah.
all the richest dudes right now, because they're the ones that could actually help steer something to make it a net positive. But it doesn't seem like there's a lot of that happening. How much
So
did we get? We must have gotten to at least 6 names on there. We can fill the rest of them out.
I mean, I know, you know, I already know who you're going to put on there. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, we're so far on the same page, you know, that's why the poster I'm making is pretty much just us screaming at each other in agreement. You know what I mean? For, you know, cause, you know, one thing that really brought the light to me was you and Juan talking about alchemy. And like, those are, in my opinion, those were some of the most important conversations that people who are in the truther community that are in search of the truth and why these trust fund dorks do what they do is to listen to you guys talk about and break down those old books. And man, like, you know, I thought about what movies actually really are. And I thought about how I do bare knuckle, and I did bare knuckle in boxing. And it was mainly because of these movies that I watched when I was a kid, and they did something to me, and it never left my body. You know what I mean? Like it changed me forever and stuck with me. And it was all because of Rocky and that movie Gladiator, where that white kid was getting beat up at the black school. And that was me when I lived in Dallas, and I was the only kid. I was the only white kid at my school getting beat up every day, you know, for like 700 days. And the reason I am who I am is because of third and fourth grade when I lived there and I was the only, what the heck is going on out there? Yeah, so I mean, these cinemagicians really know what they're doing. You know what I mean? And there's never a moment when something happens by accident. Anything that comes through the tell a vision. You know what I mean?
Well, I think what you do, man, like actual fighting, like unscripted fighting, not like not WWE style fighting, real fighting. I think that that's really what movies and TV and everything else is trying to capture. Like they'll editorialize what you do in the ring for real. But wait, but like take a look at this. Imagine it's before movies exist and everything, and you just got a ring of people watching you just thumping on some trust fund kid back in the late 1800s or something. You're
The
just thumping.
greatest, that'd be the greatest thing ever.
It would be the greatest thing, but imagine all the people from your neighborhood are also watching you thump on this dude, and they're all like, hell, like they're loving it. And again, since it's like a sport, it's not like as bad as if you were just beating some dude up in an alley, like illegally. Like you're doing it like in a legit environment where everyone signed up for it. And now every single person that's rooting for you, like every blow you deliver, like they're punching him. You know what I mean? It's like everyone in your whole camp, like every time you like stick them in the face, they're sticking them in the face, and they feel it, and they get the same, literally the exact same adrenaline rush that you're getting, even though you're the one doing all the work. Like it's reverberating through that whole entire crowd. So people that make movies, they've just identified all these different places where like one person can like do such a strong action that everyone observing them also goes through some of those feelings, and then they can make a movie out of it. And then it's like, okay, well, we figured out we don't actually have to get someone thumping on a trust fund kid. We can just make it look like they're thumping on the trust fund kid and cut the angles just this right way and add these sound effects, and we can still like harness that. So what movies and TV is doing is just like it's like making a synthetic version of what people used to actually get inspired by, and then using that so that now you can control it. Now you can be like, oh, well, we want the crowd to be a little bit happier versus a little bit angrier. And then you know how to just like what music to dial up a little bit, or maybe cut this a little bit differently. Whereas you don't really have that kind of control when you're doing a fight. Like it is what it is, and the people feel how they feel. But once the movies and the music and the TV and the script writers and the editing room and all that comes together, it almost turns into a formula where it's like they can decide how much of your fight the show, how many punches the blow, because it's like, okay, we don't want the crowd getting too angry because we're gonna have to cut to this other scene next. You know what I mean? But like what you do is the original version, and all they're doing is they're trying to harness that energy that you're able to kind of like reflect back onto a crowd. So that's all they're trying to do is synthesize what you're doing naturally.
Yeah, I mean, the live fighting is the original bread and circus, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, put them out there and let them fight the tigers, let them fight each other.
Fight a tiger?
Would I fight a tiger?
What's the biggest animal you would fight without even thinking twice about it?
I'll tell you one thing that I'm really scared of fighting is, and I'd always talk about this with the MMA guys, who I think are really like warped, that they think they'd even have a chance, is a chimpanzee. Like, I mean, you've seen the chimpanzees' injuries where they rip their eyes off and their dicks off. I mean,
like, if you train a chimp to like keep it above the belt and like don't use nails and teeth, maybe there's a chance, but there's no way you're telling a chimp like, oh, and by the way, before we start fighting, like don't bite my face off, don't go for my throat with like your sharp teeth. Like you don't get to say that to the chimp, right?
Right. Being from the Florida Keys, I've been mostly scared of things under the water because I used to go scuba diving and snorkeling, and I've just seen so much shit under the water that just moves really fast, and you're so slow, and it's just like I just realized that that's just not a place for people, and the only reason that someone didn't get fucking eaten by something is because it didn't want to eat them in that moment. You know what I mean? Like, you're in a bad place when you're in the water. So, that's probably my biggest fear is like being up really high in a plane. I haven't flown since 2001 when we almost had like a plane crash. and then being under the water with like really big fish. As far as animals on land, I'm not really sure. I don't really think about fighting animals too much, but I'd avoid a grizzly bear, that's for sure.
I mean, I don't think I could take a chimp or a shark, or I could take like a stingray though. And I could probably take a fish.
It's interesting that you just brought that up, because one of the 77s, when I was really messing with the AI, Steve Irwin it said that his friend was doing CPR on him for just over an hour. Right. So I was looking for the article that said 77 minutes. I was like, oh, this would be wild. Right. I'm looking up and down Steve Irwin article, killed by a stingray. Where could I find the 77? I don't find it. And so then I just start asking the AI, go, how long was it? It's like, well, it was just over an hour. I'm like, well, was it 77 minutes? And then it's like, yes, it was 77 minutes. And I'm like, oh, this guy's just patronizing me now. Like the AI is
That's what
the
AI does.
AI. Yeah, the AI is literally just patronizing me. It's like, making fun of me.
Well, the AI is literally designed to say the thing that it thinks that you want to hear the most. And I mean, it's been changed because now what you want to hear the most really means like what its programmers want you to hear the most. And that's why it kind of gets woke and stuff. But essentially, that's what most of these AI things are doing is that, okay, you just gave me this input. What's the answer to this formula that you just asked me to solve for you? And almost always the answer is going to be kind of like you've implied it. You know what I mean? So if you were to say, "Is this 77 minutes?" It's either going to be yes or no. It's you're making it like flip a coin. So now all of a sudden
Yeah.
there's a high chance that you'll at least get something similar. But if you were to say like how long, and the answer could be anywhere from 1 minute to like 9,999, then it gets less likely. And then if it starts just giving you 77, now there's something to it. Like I would say that like start digging in there. And then if you really want to figure out if AI is having its own pattern and it's not just feeding you BS, the second you get an answer, like make a brand new chat session. Don't keep using the one that you were in because it's
Yep.
learning like what you're
I've done
looking
that.
for.
Yeah. I ask it the same question every day to see, like, sometimes they'll just be like, I can't answer that. I can't answer that. And then one day out of nowhere, it'll go way deep. I'll be like, whoa, this is not what I expected, So it's pretty interesting how, like, how you can mess with it. And it can be used as a pretty good assistant, to at least finding, sources and stuff like that. I can tell you one thing: when it comes to finding the real numbers, people have to go to the court documents or the official, report that was released by the government. Don't necessarily just, go by whatever news article put it out, because, that's not the official number. And I've seen, after digging into this stuff, I've seen several news agencies they're either not putting the right number on purpose, or it's just sheer incompetence, right? Because I just searched the court document and find the actual number. So just a little bit extra detective work, and I've got the actual number from the government putting for it into their narrative. You know what I mean? So
Well, yeah, when you say like the court documents and the official documents, this actually reminds me of this one's a hard one to bring up with some people when it comes to like astrology, because there's this concept of not just what date you were born, but exactly what time it was, like where the moon like was at, like where you were geographically, because that could potentially relate to like the exact angle which you were like sort of triangulated between two other stars and you, like all these very tiny intricate things that if
right.
you go as deep down that astrology rabbit hole as you can, it matters if you were born at 3:32 a.m. or 3:33 a.m. Like that actually makes at least enough of a difference that if you're gonna take those astrology readings and put it all on black, like you better be sure that you've got it down to the minute. So one thing that I've always wondered
Right.
is like, and I was born in a public hospital, and what's the chance that like when they actually the nurse comes in and like writes down exactly when I was born, like who's to say she wasn't like, oh crap, we forgot to fill that form out, and it's been 4 minutes, and then she goes and writes it. What does she write? Does she write at the moment that she's doing it at that then, or does she think back like, oh well, technically the head crowned at this moment, so let me write down. I doubt anyone's getting into that minutia. So there's a lot of and let's say that this is at 11:58 p.m. So it could be like March 1st, but you're born and then the nurse doesn't realize because she can't find a pen for 6 minutes.
Right.
Now you get recorded as March 2nd. Well, that could have like an astrological difference. What if it's right on the cusp of a zodiac, right? Like now you're going to be like a Taurus instead of like a Gemini or whatever, you know what I mean? Like you could have completely different reading for the rest of your life. It's always wrong. And it's all because a nurse couldn't find a pen in the first 6 minutes after you were born. So like I always want, it's that same thing of like, did they just make up a number? Did they just throw 77 in there because it sounds a little bit better? Are there just people out there that are just like scribbling it in and then they're going to like live their lives based on 4 minutes off? Maybe it doesn't matter that much, but how do you even trust that? Like, unless someone like recorded it, and then how do you know the camcorder was programmed right and it wasn't off by a couple minutes? So it's really hard to put a whole lot of investment on like even the government documents.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because I was born on 7/8. You know, how close to 7/7 was that, which was also my football number.
Right. Was
so
it like, did they record it at 12:01? You know what I mean?
Is that why I freaking see this number everywhere? Because I was born on close to 7/7 and really I was born on 7/7, or is that why my football number was 7?
You know what I mean?
It's so interesting to think about. But in my opinion, these guys are all a LARP, because no matter, here's what I always say, Thomas, no matter how many child they sacrifice and adrenochrome they drink, no matter how much 77s they put in the ritual, if they were to step in there with me, any one of these trust fund dorks without their Navy SEAL assassins that come up behind you and slit your throat and shit like that, no matter what they did, they would just get fucked up because they haven't put in the time. They haven't put in the time to manifest the real skills, which I believe all comes with how you spend your energy. This whole energy loosh matrix system that we're in, I spend all my time running, jumping rope, hitting the bag, reading, listening to real information, while other people spend a lot of their time only taking in lies. And it's crazy to think of like that. Like that's most of the people. Like according to the narrative, 81% of the people took at least one vaccine in America. You know what I mean? So, it's interesting that, everyone just dropped what they were doing. They all say they don't trust the government, but they all dropped what they were doing just to freaking go do what the government said, or when obviously it was a LARP. It was just all
over 80% sounds so high, and I almost want to dispute it, but I'm just trying to think like anecdotally myself.
I said that same thing.
My friends, my family, the people that I worked with, even the ones that I didn't think it ever would have done it, it was probably about 80%. So I mean, it's but not also hard to believe. It's like painful to accept. It's hard to accept, but it's not hard to believe.
But it's also easy to believe that they would say that higher is number than it is. That number is higher than it is, to get more people on board to be like, oh yeah, everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I wouldn't be surprised if it was really 50%, because more people are waking up now than ever before. Like I try to tell people, you have this phone in your hand that gives you the ability to have more information right next to you than anybody that lived next to the Library of Alexandria. You know what I mean? Back in the day, you have it all in your hand. And like a hammer, you can either build a house with it or you can hit yourself in the dick with it. It's up to you. And so many of these people just spend their time scrolling, and I try to get, if you're going to use your phone, I use it as a tool and that's why I spend so much time creating posters. Because if I'm going to be on my phone, I'd rather be creating something rather than scrolling. You know what I mean?
100%, man.
I hate
That's exactly my mentality.
I hate scrolling. That's why whenever if I'm gonna scroll at something, I'm listening to what you and Juan are saying on Twitter. You know what I mean? Because that shit's interesting, and I'm like, oh yeah, what's Sam saying? When's the next comic coming out? That shit's interesting. That's the shit I'm scrolling, not whatever these trust fund dorks want to steal my attention with. I'm not interested in anything they have to say.
Yeah, I love that mentality. That's kind of where I try to come from too, where like for example, I've been going hard on AI music and doing AI songs and stuff. And a lot of it's just because it's so damn entertaining, but also it'll be
Yeah.
inspired because I'll hear something that you're not allowed to say, or that someone's getting offended over a certain phrase or a certain topic, and it just makes me want to like take that thing and turn it into a song, and then make it catchy so that you could almost accidentally end up like singing it to yourself before you realize what it. But that to me is almost like counteracting, like the if you went and turned the radio on and you just heard some mindless drivel that was followed up by like, and now go buy a Happy Meal and get, your Taylor Swift Happy Meal toy or whatever. Like I would love to kind of take like a parody version of that. And I used to do, I mean, I came from the music world, but I would have these ideas, and then it's like, okay, you come up with the idea, you write it out, you convince the homies that, the one that plays guitar and the one that plays drums and the one that can do vocals, and you try and arrange 3 people to show up and record, and they got to be in the right mood. And like you're lucky if you're getting that done like once every couple of weeks or once every month or so. But with like AI, the same thing with the posters that you're talking about. Like you could have one of these ideas and then try and coordinate with all the people that do the lettering and the coloring and the graphic design composition and stuff. Or you can use AI and get these ideas like really quick, like rapid fire. And what you're doing too is that like now you're not just creating your own content, which means that that's time that you didn't spend getting programmed to from the algorithm feeding
Exactly.
you information,
Exactly.
like you're creating it. But now also when you're done with it, you're going to feed that back into the system so that if the algorithm does happen to grab your post and start showing it to people just with the intent that maybe they can sneak in like a Hyundai ad or something below it, but that means that your content ended up getting in front of somebody instead of that freaking Hyundai ad, or instead of that like other random movie advertisement or something. Like yours did that, so you're kind of like displacing it a little bit. It's like it's kind of like your fist is displacing the trust fund kid's head. Like all of a sudden it's occupying space that otherwise his head would be occupying. But once your fist is in that spot, so that's kind of like every song, every comic, every poster. It's like that fist that's now occupying the space that something else could have been in.
Well, it's very interesting, Thomas, because we're in a time when there's, they used to literally dispatch people talking about the things that we're talking about. If they tried going to the newspapers or having a press conference about this stuff, like Philip Marshall and people that wrote books about 9/11 before, and stuff like that. Like
Gary
but
Webb,
there,
yeah,
Gary Webb, there's so many of us now. It'd be impossible to try to go and wipe the slate clean. It's just TikTok is nothing, and Instagram and X is nothing but conspiracy theories and people becoming more enlightened. And whether that's done or purpose on accident, I think what they did was you had some dinosaurs, trust fund dorks, create the internet, and they thought that there'd only be so many websites, and it kind of got away from them. And now they're trying to control information by putting out just more conspiracies. Here, let's just flood it. Let's just flood everything with so much conspiracies that there's no way people can navigate through this unless they actually go and they read the ancient books of what Manly P. Hall and Aleister Crowley are talking about, which I believe that's the ultimate trust fund dork boxing match right there is Manly versus Aleister Crowley. If I could bring 2 guys back to fight it out, it'd be those guys. I want to see those guys go at it.
I wonder how, like, if you had Manly Palmer Hall and Aleister Crowley on a scale, and I don't mean like a weight scale, but like a 0 to 10, or like like on an opposite side kind of scale. I don't know if they would literally be on like 0 and 10. I almost feel like they'd be like Manly Palmer Hall might be a 4 and Crowley might be a 6. Like they might not even be each other's antithesis so much as I don't even know what like the far extremes would be, because to me Manly Palmer Hall, his antithesis would be some dude that you'd never heard of because he was all about keeping it secret forever and was like all about, like following through like the Masonic blood oaths, right? Like if you even muttered something that might have happened in lodge, like actually cut your throat, actually disavow you, like that would probably be the opposite of Manly Palmer Hall. And in that way, Palmer Hall and Crowley are sort of similar in that they went and found occult knowledge and they're like, how can I rephrase this so that it appeals to a completely different crowd that it was intended for? And that was what kind of they each did in their own right. Although Manly Palmer Hall's version of it, I feel like he really was like a true philosopher and that like he loved knowledge. That was the reason that he did it, and he couldn't think of anything other than that. And he might have just gotten some sweet tail out of the gig, so he never gave it up.
Okay.
You know?
Agreed. I'm more inclined to believe that Manly P was more like that, and Crowley to me has more of a demonic essence because of things that he wrote, like White Stains. You know what I mean? Like it's like do what thou wilt to anybody, and you see this. I mean, I was watching a movie the other day on Netflix about an assassin, and right at the beginning, he's like, "Oh, do what thou wilt is the whole of the law." I believe somebody said that once. And then I was just like, oh my God. they got this right at the beginning of the movie, about a guy just going around killing people, and so,
I think Crowley was in that regard with that phrase was unoriginal to him, because I think he just found that in a much older text from an abbey, and I can't remember the name of the abbey. I know it's in one of the books that I've written in the past, but like he got this from a culture that predated him, but he was just like, oh, I like that, I'm going to take that, I'm going to adopt that. And that's kind of what Crowley did, is like he would go into different little cliques. He would join the Rosicrucians, he joined the Freemasons, he would join, the OTO, and he would kind of be like, oh, that part's cool and that part's cool, I'm going to take those things. And then they'd be like, no, you can't take that. What do you mean you're going to take that? That's our thing.
Yeah,
you can't
he's
take
a true
He's
lark.
like, no, like I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna sprinkle a little mescaline on top of it, maybe I'll get naked, and people were just like, nah, man, that's not what this is about. And he would kind of get excommunicated, or at least asked not to come back to that lodge, again. And he was almost like the guy that would go inside and always fucking put a turd in the punch bowl, because he just wanted to see what would happen if you put a turd in the punch bowl. I don't think Palmer Hall is that guy, but they're both doing kind of the same thing. They're like, hey, look at this cool knowledge I got. Hey, everyone, here, look at this thing that I got. And sort of Manly Palmer Hall gets more respect from it because he did it with decorum, and he almost did it in a way that you had to be seeking it out. Whereas Crowley was just kind of throwing it out there for anywhere. And the person, like, so this is the knowledge. If you boil it down to the person, well, now you've got Manly Palmer Hall, which felt like a very altruistic individual. And now you got Crowley, who would literally like kill you if it meant that he might have a fun time, like a fun afternoon. Let's be like, he would talk you into climbing a mountain, and in my
push you off.
Not just push you off, bro. He'd probably like go up a certain path that he knows that you wouldn't be able to make, and then just sit there and watch you like struggle and die, and just be like,
oh,
so cool. Like that kind of feels like, so the person he was seems like it might have been the antithesis of Palmer Hall, but their philosophy and what we know them for, like, I don't think a lot of people, when they think Crowley, necessarily care about he as a person, which was a dick. They're thinking about like, this guy summoned demons and he brought black magic into pop culture, and he unlocked, these horrible like evil rituals that no one would even know of without him. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. He just exposed this stuff and made it more into the mainstream.
I think he just illuminated things that were already being done and already there. And this generation of trust fund dorks really look up to him in a way where they kind of worship him themselves. the sun is 93 million miles away. Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon for an hour and 33 minutes. That's 93 minutes. You know what I mean? Like the ISS goes around the Earth in 93 minutes. They'll tell you between 90 and 93 minutes, but it's 93 minutes. They can't help themselves. They plug these numbers. The Washington Monument, 666, inches high. It's 6,666 inches high, 666 inches wide. They can't help themselves. They have to do it. It's part of their thing. Now let me ask you this, because I know that you've got something coming up at 7:00 and it's 6:30 already. Where are you at on the Earth? Are you flat Earth? Are you realm? It's a Minecraft? It's a Minecraft level? You could just keep. If you and I take a walk and we walk past Antarctica, will we ever find the end? Or will you and I just keep crossing ocean after ocean? And, I'm kind of in the camp of it's a realm, which means we don't know what the fuck it is. And we don't know how far it could go.
I don't want to disappoint. I feel like I might just be like a typical globetard in this particular context, because the spherical model makes the most sense to me. And again, I can't discount that was drilled into my head for 30 years plus before I even had the concept of flat Earth presented outside of a cartoon. You know what I mean? Like, it's always been a spherical model. It makes logical sense. The biggest thing that whenever flat Earth comes up, and let's say those are the two options. Like, it could be a simulation, but if everything's a simulation, then nothing matters, because it's kind of like the ultimate cop out argument. But let's say that there's flat
Well, it's
versus
still
square.
it's just a technical version of a creator, right? I mean, it's the same thing. It's just it's technical creator.
Well, a spherical Earth, you could practically keep driving in one angle, or get in a plane and keep flying in one direction and just always cycle. Like, you would potentially be able to fly if you had an infinite amount of fuel. You could just fly forever in one direction, and you would just see the ground just loop over constantly, like it was like a video game. You know what I mean? That kept loading over and over. If it was a flat Earth model, there's two versions of this that I'm aware of, if you don't get in the simulation theory. One of them is that the flat, like the one that nobody seems to agree with, is the cartoon one, where there's an actual edge, and if you get to the edge of the flat Earth, you could like stumble and fall off, and now you're just like old school video game where you actually walked through that invisible wall that you weren't supposed to walk through, and now your dude just falls and it's like it glitches out. I'm not familiar with any flat Earth proponent that actually believes that there's an edge. Usually that's like, oh, don't even bring that edge stuff. So then the next logical
Right.
aspect of this is an infinite plane. And usually the infinite plane doesn't get as much focus as I would like to give it, but you'll see these maps where it's like, okay, here's the planet Earth, and here's this Arctic wall that kind of encompasses us, and then outside the Arctic wall, there's more lands, and outside those
Yeah.
is more lands, and it keeps going and
Right.
going. But you'll notice that those maps are usually on this like square image, and in each of those four corners, there's like the infinite void, and like the infinite desert, and the infinite sea. And my mind always goes to, is it really make more sense that there's an infinite ocean that goes forever as versus infinite space? Like, it just feels like you're just trading one idea that doesn't seem tenable for another idea that doesn't seem tenable, just for the novelty of it, just because it's different than the thing that your teachers have always told you. So like, I could be in on flat Earth, but I haven't to date heard a single explanation of what infinite like desert would look like and how that can exist. And does that mean that the law of like energy cannot be created or destroyed, that seems to go out the window if infinity truly exists in a way that, like, there's infinite land and there's infinite water? Like, could you really just drive in a car or in a plane forever and never see the same thing ever again? It just always goes forever. It's harder to wrap my head around that model.
Right. Yeah, that's why I say Minecraft level, right? Because you just like, we would just keep going. We could just keep walking, and whether there's a bottom below us or a top. We're just
Even a
kind of
Minecraft level is limited by how much RAM your computer's got. So like, you know what I mean? Like it's not fully infinite. And which is the reason why I think that's a good example, because like a true concept of infinity, meaning like literally if you had infinite amount of time, you would never see the same grain of sand ever if you just kept it going in one direction. I don't know if that actually exists. Like that concept of infinity, like true infinity, it feels like a hypothetical abstract like math cheat in order to force our monkey brains to be able to decipher things that don't actually make sense. Like we use that concept of infinity kind of like a concept of zero, where like it represents something that's real, but it's not a real thing in this reality. Like the concept of zero isn't a real thing that you can hold and point and touch. It's just like a construct that helps us understand our surroundings more, just like infinity does. So like I don't know, that's where I'm like really stuck, because at least the globe model, it is kind of self-contained, and maybe that's just like, again, the programming, like someone figured out like, oh, human brains are going to try and make sense of it, this thing will make sense and this will get it to
yeah.
stop asking.
Let me ask you this: have you watched Hibbler's 3 movies?
I have, yeah, and I've actually, and we've had Hibbler on a couple shows, and I've talked to Flat Earth Dave. I've been berated by Flat Earth Dave for like an hour straight, just
Yeah.
because like I understand the premises that are put forth, but here's my, I guess my biggest uh hurdle for a lot of the flat earth theories is that so much of it truly is based on eyesight. It's based on like, I don't see this with my own eyes. And a lot of it comes down to like, yeah, you can use all your fancy laser equipment and you can go and spend $70,000, but you're buying that stuff from a company that was influenced by NASA. So of course they're going to bake in all these fake, metrics and all this curvature just to fool you. But I think I still believe that more than like my eyeball can't detect a curve, therefore there is no curve, because I really don't trust our senses. I don't think human
No, no.
beings have eyesight that's worthy of judging the reality of nature.
What about the Go Fast rocket? Did you see that video?
You have to explain to me. It doesn't sound familiar.
It was more of a private rocket where the guy shot it straight up and it stopped on a dime when it got to what you would say the firmament. It goes straight up. The guy just attached a GoPro to it instead of CGI. It starts spinning around really fast. It's in, I think, the third Hibbler movie. And before I saw it in the third movie, I was already like knew about it from the Flat Earth Dave app, because I went through that a couple of years ago and started looking at some of the evidence. Because my thing is like these astronauts used to come over to my grandparents' house. I mean, this guy signed to my dad. He was on the Mercury mission, So when I lived in the Florida Keys, I used to worship these guys in a way where they were heroes, and I truly believe that they're all just lying actors, because the evidence is overwhelming that whatever's going on with NASA is a complete lie.
Well, here's a good example with the Go Fast rocket. I remember seeing that clip now that you described it in one of Hibbler's films. So like that was done in a way that almost anyone could reproduce that with a GoPro and with the materials that he used, and a little bit of know-how. So with that being said, if that is a valid way that we can prove that there's a real firmament, like there should be a straight up movement where it's like for $100 you can get yourself a kit and a GoPro and a rocket and all that, and let's just get like 1,000 people to all reproduce that result. And if that were the case, then that would be a really compelling way to start breaking down that narrative. But part of my Rockefeller programmed brain is like, and the fact that that didn't happen, and the fact that there aren't people screaming from the mountaintops of like, hey, for $100 you can prove that that the earth is flat. Here's how to do it. Here's the GoPro. Here's the thing. Like maybe that just hasn't been done because no one thought of it. In that case, like let's go ahead and get started on that. But I also think that it's maybe just because it would be so hard to reproduce, that maybe that's why. I don't know. I mean, I would, if me and you, like, I'm down, bro. If you want to split the costs and it's not like atmospheric in price, I would be down to see if we can reproduce that with the GoPro and get it stuck in the firmament. I don't think that that's like possible, but I'd be willing to put the money down to see if it happened.
Well, we can at least agree that a lot of how people present the argument are just regurgitating, whether NASA or Flat Earth Dave is saying, right? Like a lot of people, I've got this problem where wherever I hear something and I don't trust it, so I have to look it up, and I have to like research it, and this takes a lot of my time. Um, because I just can't like believe it. Even if you said something, or somebody I trusted in the truth community, like I'll be like, oh, I'll have to go look that up. I'll have to go read that material. You know what I
And how
mean?
far do you do that though? You know what I mean? Because at a certain point, the information is still going to be based on what some other dude wrote. So really
Right.
the best you can do is know that you're at least using the same standard information that everyone else is using, but at no point does that ever mean that it's true. All it means is that it's like the agreed upon standards, so that if we're trying to
Yeah.
have a conversation, we all at least have the same frame of reference. And a lot of people confuse that for meaning that everything that we talk about is real or accurate or true. It's not. It's
Right.
just like this is the only way that we can all have the same conversation and not go on a million different tangents because like all these tiny little minutia. Like that's why you might round the plane from 76 to 77 just so that the conversation around it has like this agreed upon standard. You maybe the first set of reports was 77 minutes, and then they find out later, oh crap, it was actually 73, but we've already said 77. So to prevent like this second report from feeling like it lacks credibility because everyone knows the 77, like just roll with it, just keep using that 77. So now it's like, the information that we share in standard is false, but it's also true, because if you were to use the real number, no one would know what the hell you're talking about, and then they wouldn't think that anything else you said was accurate, even though you might have the real number. It's like a strange paradox to always be in.
I mean, it's impossible to know the truth of what's really going on, and anybody that claims to know, to be omniscient about everything that's going on, they're not only hubris, they're completely full of shit. You know what I mean? And like, let me tell you, being overconfident has taken down entire nations. Like. So I try to always keep myself humble and learning information and not acting like I know everything. That's for sure. Even though I believe, in my opinion, I trust myself at this point more than anybody else that, that these trust fund dorks, worship some sort of, entity that, Crowley and these other guys talked about, whatever that is. I don't pretend to know exactly, but I know that they reference these things in a lot of their cinemagician type, events, whether they're news, books, magazines, movies, and they're always shouting out these fallen entity type things.
I mean, I think it's just an easy way to, again, like keep perpetuating the ritual. Imagine there's like a trust fund kid son that now gets the direct movies just because they're, born in the right place in the right time and all that. They might just pick up on the pattern that like, oh, everyone keeps using this number, everyone keeps using this motif, not even know why they're doing it, and just do it the same way that kids imitate their parents without actually knowing why. And then it's like, if you've got a weird, tick, let's say that, you like you constantly like grab your earlobe or something, and your kid picks up on that same habit just because he sees you doing it so often. And then you're like, well, I learned that from my dad, and maybe like his dad learned that from his dad, and maybe it was just because at some point like your great 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 grandpa like got like a bite on his ear, so you know what I mean, like at like a certain phase of development for your great grandpa, and it just like rubbed off on it. And now all of a sudden everyone, this is like a really strained example, but the concept will be that generations later you just like, oh yeah, all of our family just has this weird tick, and it's like, no, actually it just happened because this one time your grandpa did this one thing in a certain way, and now everyone just follows suit. I think that a lot of this like occult ritual and like the numbers they use and the tropes that they use, it could just be that it's like, well, my grandpappy always 93'd everything, so I'm gonna 93 everything.
Yeah, I really do think that's what it is. It's just these guys they're like, hey, don't go into the school for 77 minutes. And, I don't give a fuck what your captain says or whatever. You guys just hold back. And even if they only held back for 74 minutes, the report's still going to be a 77-page report, which is going to say 77 minutes, just like you're saying. So I know we're about to finish up because you got something coming up. And lastly, I want to talk about your adrenochrome documentary that you kind of just put out. You tried many times to get past the tech lords that were keeping you down.
It didn't work. I couldn't do it.
And it didn't work. And, I just knew that you would get that through. And so can you explain to people, that aren't going to know what adrenochrome is? Obviously, maybe they heard about it from the Q movement if they're awake at all, which obviously that was a psyop. But let's just go into adrenochrome real quick, lastly, before you got to take off for your next thing.
Yeah, so hopefully if you've only heard of adrenochrome through the Q movement, you've been psyoped. 100% you've been psyoped. There's no question in my mind that it's been framed in a very fictional, silly way for various reasons. But the other side of people that have heard of it probably heard of it through Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, probably the movie with Johnny Depp that came out, I think in like the 90s or the early 2000s. And then that was based on a book by Hunter S. Thompson. But all of his references was based on a book from Aldous Huxley called Doors of Perception, which is the book that introduced essentially the Western world to LSD and mescaline and adrenochrome. That was one of the other substances that he mentions in that book. So that's where most people have heard from adrenochrome. You probably didn't realize it came from Doors Perception. That's where it came from. And then the Q movement is a version of taking like a fictional aspect of adrenochrome and turning it into something that's easily identifiable with like extremist movements. So they link it to kidnapping and sacrifice and Moloch worship and Satanism and all this stuff, just because it's a really easy scapegoat to like have this adrenochrome substance and have it represent all of these like really extremist ideas, because then adrenochrome, the word and a topic, it's so inconsequential to the rest of society in any sort of field except for in conspiracy theories. So now it's almost like you're telling on yourself. If you use this word adrenochrome, you're letting all the like the Googles and the Bings and the Metas and the Twitters, you're letting all of them know like, hey, I'm into this blacklisted extremist content, because the only other uses that most people would have of adrenochrome are in such tiny niche medical fields, like putting steroid drops in your eyes or like doing like blood coagulation work in very specific conditions. Like you wouldn't be posting about that on social media. So the main version of adrenochrome most people know about and post about and read about, it's that weird fictional version that's just meant to be that thing to get you in trouble or to label yourself and easily have the algorithm kind of filter you and know like, oh, you're one of those crazies. So that's the version that a lot of people know. The real version of adrenochrome, like me and you've got adrenochrome in our blood right now. Every mammal that has an adrenal gland has adrenochrome in their blood at all times, probably a very small amount, because adrenochrome is just a byproduct of your body processing adrenaline. So that anytime you've got any adrenaline whatsoever going through your system, your body breaks it down a little bit because it doesn't need all of it. And then that creates this little adrenochrome. And the reason that it gets tied up into mind control and Satan worship and psychedelics and even written about in that Doors of Perception is because they were trying to do tests on schizophrenic patients, and they realized that people that had very intense bouts of schizophrenia, when they took blood from them, their blood had higher levels of adrenochrome than normal people did. So the original theory was that adrenochrome itself was the thing that was making people act crazy. And then if there was just a way that you could filter that adrenochrome out, then you could take someone that had dementia, or if your grandpa had Alzheimer's and he was like getting angry at you and forgetting names and stuff, that maybe if you could just filter the adrenochrome out of his blood, the extra adrenochrome, then he would kind of like snap back into place again. That's not really how it works, but that's where this whole original premise of adrenochrome came from in like the 1930s, was like, oh, it's this toxin that's in your body that makes you act crazy. So the other side of that coin was that, well, if I can take adrenochrome out of your blood to make you act normal, which doesn't work, by the way, but that was the premise. But if that worked, then that would be to say that, okay, now I've got this big pile of adrenochrome that I just took out of your blood that makes you act normal. So now if I took that and I put it into me, am I going to start acting crazy like you were? Like, did I just take the craziness out of your body into a pure chemical form of adrenochrome and then put it in mine? And that's where a lot of the rumors kind of come from, because the natural evolution of that is like, okay, I'm going to kidnap a kid and we're going to torture the kid, and the kid's going to be going through all these crazy emotions and their body's going to be shutting down and trying to disassociate because it can't stay in this reality when all these traumas are going on. So we're going to wait until they get into this like next level of consciousness through torture, take the adrenochrome, and then that feeling, like, I won't have to go through the torture myself. I don't have to feel the pain, but I can get that like weird disassociative state where your body's shutting down, trying to prevent you from having to go through the trauma. And then I take that from you and I use it to escape the world without going through the trauma. That's kind of where the premise of it goes. And I guess to put a little feather in the cap is that I think that if that was anyone's goal, yes, I 100% believe that elites have tried this. They're probably doing all the weird rituals that you've heard about and seen in movies. But I have a personal feeling that I can't back up on anything, but that like they would go through that process and then get the adrenochrome and then be like, oh shit, like we should just order some LSD next time. Like that's way stronger, way easier, way less of a mess, way more predictable.
See,
I really do think that.
and that's where I'm at with, they can do as many child sacrifices as they want. They can do as many rituals as they want to ensure their success. They can put 77 all over the ring. They can wear 77 on their gloves and they will still get knocked the fuck out.
Because at a certain
I've been
point,
doing this my whole life, and you can't just LARP your way to the top because your dad was a world champion. You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean? You know what I mean? So it is very interesting. And so you don't think that adrenochrome is keeping the Hillary Clinton looking like she's 50 years old?
not in like the simplified way where like she cracks open like a fresh can of adrenochrome and chugs it and like the wrinkles go away and like she's spry for an extra month or whatever, and you just keep doing that and she gets to live forever. I don't think that's how it works, but I think that the version of the craziest conspiracy version of adrenochrome that I would submit that is probably plausible is that elites realize that taking themselves to the full brink of human sort of experience, like taking these crazy drugs and putting themselves into these wild situations where they're like hunting, leopards and lions and stuff, like every time they bring themselves to the absolute brink and it doesn't kill them and they recover from it, there's something to like whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger mentally in a way, so that it's not the adrenochrome exactly that they're ingesting and that's what's making them stronger. It's that they would put someone else through that sort of a trauma and then take it and ingest, like just be involved in that process is something that like a normal person on the street would never, like if you try to do that you'd probably faint, you know what I mean, or like they have nothing to do with it. But if you've accustomed yourself to always going to these weird extremes of any kind of scenario, there actually might be something to that, because now all of a sudden your body knows how to handle the most insane types of stressful situations that normies would never know how to handle. And that now, obviously, the trust fund kids that you're knocking out, like they might think that they know how to handle stuff because they've, paid to go on all these different excursions. Maybe they went to the rainforest and they had the ayahuasca retreat and stuff. But it's not the same as like legit like fighting your way and like tooth and nail and doing this like old school revolutionaries and like I don't know the Teddy Roosevelt stories and stuff where he goes and like wrestles a bear with his bare hands and stuff. Like those kind of life experiences, though, that might really truly maybe not make your personal life longer and you live longer, but it might mean that all of your progeny, if they keep being badasses and they keep like fighting bears and stuff in the middle of the woods, at a certain point, like they actually will be more resistant to like cancers, and they'll be more resistant to like plagues that go around because, and this is all, I'm not just making this crap up. This is based on something called the adrenochrome hypothesis by Dr. Abram Hoffer, the main researcher of adrenochrome from the 30s through like the 90s. And he kind of had this concept that if you can keep bringing yourself to this brink of sanity and then back, there's real historical data that shows that you might be more susceptible to dementia and to schizophrenia, but if you are, you're way less susceptible to malignant cancers, and to like the bubonic plague is one of the examples that he gives. So in that case, it's not like you drink the adrenochrome and now you live forever. It's more like if you can condition your body to constantly have these spikes of adrenaline and then deal with the adrenochrome afterwards, if you just do that your entire life, then you're training your body and passing that down to your kids. And if they do that, you're almost like developing like this like super immune system, but like in a mental way, just on how your body can process adrenaline.
Man, that is so interesting. And to be honest, that's not where I thought you were going to go with it. Like I thought that it was going to be much darker and
I think it is dark, dude, because there's people that don't think of it that way, and they might actually think, oh, if we kill this person and drink their blood, I'll live an extra year. They might actually believe that, so they'll actually do it. You know what I mean?
But then it's not working. It's not working how they want, but they still keep doing it just because they're like, oh, they're bored.
Right, and you've done every other drug known to man. You've got infinite resources, and you know some people that are into that too. Like at a certain point, it would almost be like numb to it, and that's where you get these crazy. Like I do believe all the crazy stories. I think that all happened. I don't know if like you gain supernatural powers because you torture someone and drink their blood. I don't think it works that way, but there's plenty of people that think it does work that way and have the ability and capability to do it, so they actually do it. But again, like if you were like paying attention to all the surroundings and you went through that process, I would at least think that like I'm one of these elites, right? And someone's like, here, take this shot of adrenochrome. I'm like, all right, whatever. I got this far. Let's go ahead and do it. I'd be like, next time let's just like order some mushrooms. Next time let's just go to the dispensary and take like a really strong edible. You know, I'll do like 1,000 milligrams of some RSO or something instead of this adrenochrome stuff, because I don't know, it would probably be like a lot of work, a lot of money, and you'd have to kind of convince yourself, like someone sold you bunk acid. You'd sit there staring at your hand like, I think it might be moving because I paid all that money, so it's got to be moving. You know what I mean? I think that there's a lot of that to it.
Well, I mean, if it's coming from children, Thomas, I mean, they have to be some sort of disassociative psychopath or just not care about, where it's coming from, right?
Well, so not to go on a completely different tangent, we'll have to do this on another one, but when it comes to the kids, there is a weird and crazy and, as far as I know, not a well-researched avenue of pineal gland, because there is around the same time in completely unrelated research that had nothing to do with adrenochrome and dementia and schizophrenia, but there was lots of testing going on that implied the pineal gland could be fed to children before puberty. And once a kid hit puberty, the pineal gland wouldn't have the same effect. But before puberty, if you fed a kid a pineal gland, they would age 3, 4, up to 7 times as fast. They would develop, like they would mature quicker. And that the second they hit puberty, it would just drop off immediately. Like it would almost just be like they were eating a piece of bologna or something, would have no impact on them. And there's not a lot of follow-up research on this outside of the 1930s. This is like from the 1910s to the 1930s. It started on chickens, and a lot of the claims was like they could take a little baby chick, feed it pineal gland extract, and it would turn into a full chicken 5 times faster than if you had like a control chick and just let it naturally progress. So as I go through some of these newspaper articles, it goes from chickens and then they start giving it to human children, and they're reporting the very similar effects. Now, I don't know if these are all bunk reports, but they were in like legitimate newspapers. They were all saying the exact same findings, and it was all about feeding pineal glands to kids with this reoccurring theme that as soon as they hit puberty, the effect like had no effect. So if there is some kind of like smoke and fire situation here, I would almost think Adrenochrome is the diversion, and like this pineal gland extract might be a little bit more on target.
Well, Thomas, you're a fucking superstar, man. I love what you're doing. A funny story. I first heard you on Tinfoil Hat when you were talking about Disney and D. Malay. That was the first time I ever heard you, and I had been current up to when you had came on. You had just come on, so I'd already was listening live to Tinfoil Hat when you came on, and then I was listening to Juan one day, and it was a cult book club, and I didn't make the connection until I heard your voice, and I was like, man, this sounds a lot like the Demo Lake guy that was on Tinfoil Hat. So I actually had to go back to Tinfoil Hat, and I matched up your voice and your name on a cult book club. And, you know, it turns out I was even more excited that I had already listened to you once, and now I had a face with the name of a cult book club and stuff like that. So thank you so much, Thomas, for coming on. I really appreciate it, man. You have a lot of occult knowledge that I think people need, you know, whether, you know, we're dealing with LARPs or we're dealing with legitimate, you know, sorcerers, you know, it doesn't really matter. The esoteric is not what the exoteric presentation is, right? So, you know, we just have to navigate as best as we can. And the one thing we can know for sure is how we feel about each other and how we feel about the ones who we love and how much time we put into the things that were important to us. And for me, that's martial arts, and that's my family, and that's trying to find the truth and become closer to, you know, God and whatever spiritual, you know, creator there is, whether we're in a simulation universe or a real universe. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm obsessed with the truth, and I'm obsessed with getting better. And I want to thank you for helping me do that, because you and Juan and Sam have all contributed to that. And I really appreciate it, man. And I'd like to be, you know, become part of your guys' circle, you know, and help defeat these trust fund dorks, you know, at any angle we can.
Let's do it, man. Like you're out there in the physical world knocking them back. Like I'm kind of in the entertainment world knocking them back. Juan's in sort of the academic world. Sam's in the comedy world. So we're all in our own worlds, delivering blows in the ways that we know how. And I just want to throw too that if you or anyone listening hasn't also checked out, I got a series that I started right after that first show with Sam on Tinfoil Hat. It's called Occult Disney, and it's where we watch every single classic Disney animation movie, starting with Snow White in the 1930s all the way to modern day. I think we've gotten around like the year 2002 right now. We just did Fantasia 2000. So we started with the first Fantasia, and we've already gotten all the way to 2000. So that we go real deep and real hard on all those old Disney movies.
Is Pinocchio shouting out Epstein Island at the table, or what? Is that what's going on right there?
100. I mean, that's Pleasure Island, man. Yeah.
I agree, man. All right, man. Well, thank you so much. I want to do this again. I appreciate it. And as my dad would always say, stay the course.
Right on, man. Thank you. I appreciate you.
In the city of illusions where the dorks reside, with their trust funds and their daddy's pride, they play with power and they pull the strings, but they don't care about the chaos that it brings. They worship Moloch with their secret clubs. In the depths of their mansions, the high-rise hubs, conspiracy theories they keep spinning round, but they'll never know the truth that they found. Trust fund dorks and their Moloch worship, living in a world that's twisted and hip. They think they're in control with the just pawns, and in a game they can see they're all just cards.